Welcome to Babblecom 5. This is episode 17 of season 1 of Babylon 5 Legacies, and I really didn't remember this one overly much, so let's get into it. A Minbari war leader, Bramner, has passed away during a diplomatic tour, and his body is being put on display to every Minbari on the voyage home, leading to the arrival of a Minbari cruiser into Babylon 5 space, which triggers unhappy flashbacks for Sinclair, of course. It comes through the local jump gate, which probably needs to do some stretching given how tall the Charlins are. Garibaldi thinks it's uglies, but others would beg to differ, of course. I rather like them. Slightly shark-like, albeit with 3 fins. Yeah. On the main promenade in the station, an Earth girl steals a necklace from a stall, but as the trader calls out thief, she clutches her head and falls to the floor. Ivanova, who is having something to eat nearby, reaches her first, and Talia is close behind, saying that she needs to get her to Franklin because she's just suffered what's called a mind burst because she's a telepath. Meanwhile, the Minbari cruiser Ingada is coming in with her gun ports open. The Minbari captain declines to explain to Sinclair why this is the case as the station prepares its defences, but Delenn comes into C&C to explain that it's Minbari tradition to fly with gun ports open on such an occasion, and scans confirm that the Minbari weapon systems aren't powered up and their targeting sensors are inactive. It's similar to the riderless horse missing man formation concept in Earth tradition when a comrade is missing. And whilst parked up next to Babylon 5, they will close them again. So Garibaldi and Sinclair confirm that they will meet the cortege with Delenn. In Medlab, Talia, with nice new short hair, explains that the girl is a telepath, and so she heard her scream in her own mind. And she's a powerful one, but some telepaths only activate when they hit puberty, which seems to be the case here, as she didn't know how to block out the strong emotions being aimed at her by the stall owner. Those active from birth learn to block out others' thoughts as they develop. Franklin likens it to someone deaf hearing a jet engine for the first time. Ivanova realises she won't be on Psychor's radar as a late developer on the station, and immediately rejects Talia's plans to send her to Earth, saying she's a criminal suspect. Franklin then kicks them both out as they argue, saying she's primarily his patient right now. Garibaldi is anticipating trouble as the Minbari's body is brought on board. He apparently masterminded the attack that caused the Battle of the Line. Sinclair can't mask feeling less than happy about that as a concept. The Shire elite, the Minbari honorific for their warrior leader, is being led through the station by a Minbari called Elite Neroon of the warrior caste. Interestingly, Delenn doesn't seem to like his body being displayed like this, but his clan wanted it. So neither Sinclair nor Delenn are overly happy about the situation, it seems, although she refuses to discuss her feelings any further. In Medlab, Alyssa is coming round, but the voices rush into her head again, and Talia adopts a sort of protector role and helps her to build a mental wall to limit her perceptions. Talia got her name and she's broadcasting left, right and centre. She also plucks Ivanova's mother's early death from her head, which Talia remonstrates with her for. She's just got no grip on it, but they've at least established who she is and that she's an orphan at this point, living in down below, stealing to eat after her father passed away. Neroon and Sinclair clash over the security arrangements for the Shire Elite's body prior to the viewing. No humans allowed, basically. Neroon baits Sinclair about the line and being in control. Delenn steps in to defuse the situation before the two come to blows. Quite uncharacteristic for Sinclair to lose it like that, but clearly his whole feelings around the line are very, very sensitive still. And there's then a very nice scene with Delenn, Neroon, Sinclair and Garibaldi in the equivalent of their full dress uniforms, approaching the body lying in state with the Minbari ceremonial music playing. One slight snag spoils the mood after Neroon's speech. The body is missing. And Neroon talks about the wrath of the Shire Elite's clan being brought down on the station, and Delenn puts him in his place. While it's an extremely serious matter, one clan does not dictate Minbari policy as a whole. Garibaldi heads off to do his thing with the investigation, while Ivanova asks Sinclair for backup with Alyssa. Sinclair and Delenn are speaking in her quarters, and intriguingly, the Shy Elite was actually religious caste with the Star Riders clan before he became a warrior during the war with Earth. Delenn is constructing something from multicoloured geometric shapes, something we saw in Signs and Portents when Mr. Morden came visiting. Bremner, it seems, chose to fight out of conscience and obeyed the religious caste's order to surrender at the Battle of the Line. Naroon is also a Star Rider and would always have followed his orders, but may have been of a different mind had it just been down to him. Apparently one war leader, Sinoval, actually suicided rather than give the surrender order. Clearly the warrior caste, once committed, are very difficult to stop. Garibaldi quizzes Natoth about the body, but she says body snatching is not one of the regime's accomplishments. She suggests he look at the carrion eaters in the alien sectors. Nasty. Talia has brought new clothes for Alyssa on her charm offensive. Now it's Ivanova's turn to tell her mother's story. Mr. Garibaldi has given evidence that the Shy Elite's body may have been taken to the Pac Marar, the carrion eaters. Interrogating one with Naroon, who claims ignorance, Garibaldi decides that all the Pac Marar are going to have their stomachs pumped. That is going to be unpleasant for all concerned. Meanwhile, Natoth is propositioning Alyssa to be a genetic donor for Narns to be able to develop their own lines of telepaths. As previously established, Narns lack telepaths, and Jakar has gone down this road before with a previous telepath on the station. Alyssa is intrigued but then revulsed when she reads Natoth. Her mind is very alien to her, inevitably, and the experience leaves her unsettled. Ivanova encourages Natoth to go about her business, having inadvertently recommended teeth checking to her. The stomach pumping has gone as pleasantly as expected, but Franklin says there's nothing to suggest any consumption of Minbari remains in the Pac Marar's innards. So now Garibaldi has to get more forensic. Alyssa is established to be a high P10, so a very strong telepath as they go. Talia and Ivanova continue to bicker over what's best for her, and Ivanova touches a nerve by bringing Ironheart into the conversation. Alyssa says no one is asking what she wants, which is to know the truth about all her options. But there is one option that hasn't been explored yet, and that's the Minbari, although there's no mention of the Centauri, oddly, although they do have telepaths. It turns out, in speaking with Delenn, that Minbari telepaths aren't paid, but are very well respected by other Minbari, and so they're supported in helping others who are in need of their services. Alyssa again peeks into an alien mind, but this time gets a clear burst of white-robed Minbari stunning warrior caste guards and approaching the Shy Elite's casket. She makes her excuses and leaves, asking Ivanova if there's something going on involving a body. Ivanova calls Garibaldi in. Meanwhile, Sinclair's quarters have been ransacked, and he gets into a fist fight with the intruder, who of course is Naroon, thinking Sinclair's quarters won't have been searched. Sinclair knocks him down, and Garibaldi comes in, noting that he searched the quarters with Delenn to eliminate the potential for predictable accusations of bias. Naroon is escorted out, and Alyssa escorted in. And Delenn's busted. She both stole Bramner's body and has managed to cremate it for the journey home. Why? Because he was religious caste, not warrior, not at heart. She knew him well, and he had told her that he did not want to be a monument to war. This leaves Sinclair in a horrible position. Compromise Delenn, or compromise the standing of the station by not telling Naroon. Delenn is relatively open about there being a rift between the religious and warrior castes as a result of the surrender order that ended the Earth Minbari War, and this would only widen it. Delenn accepts that Naroon needs to know the truth, but it will come from her. So she has it out with him in her quarters. Bremner was warrior caste by his father, but religious caste by his mother, which apparently takes precedence, so Naroon's protests are somewhat quashed by that. Delenn goes on to put him in his place by saying that his clan ignored his wishes for his ashes to be scattered in space near Minbar, and in so doing disobeyed a great war leader, showing him great disrespect in death. So she pulls rank, and threatens him with the destruction, the dishonour, of his entire clan if he doesn't do as the Grey Council is now commanding him to do through her. He is to support the story of the Shy Elite's transformation, and further is required to apologise in person to Sinclair for his behaviour. He acknowledges her here as Setai, of course, but he didn't in public. So Naroon and Sinclair do improve their relationship somewhat, with Naroon noting that Sinclair sounds like a Minbari, as he says that the Shire Elite can be honoured for both his battles and his dedication to peace in life. And Sinclair also offers to send a message to the Minbari homeworld about his respect for their war leader. There's even a slightly awkward handshake initiated by the Minbari. Alyssa visits Delenn and Sinclair in the garden, having made her decision, and Delenn hopes that she will help the two races to better communicate with each other, something which is clearly needed given recent events. So she's rather bravely going to be quite alone on the Minbar homeworld as a human telepath. There's also a thawing of relations between Ivanova and Talia as they say goodbye to Alyssa. She seems quite settled in her decision and is grateful to Ivanova for showing her the options. Sinclair is also waiting for her separately and goes fishing. Alyssa tells him that the word chrysalis was on Delenn's mind and that she closed down fast when she touched it. Sinclair explains to her that it's another word for a cocoon when she asks. She gives him a hug and heads to her Minbari flyer. So my thoughts on this one. I didn't remember it very well, and I was pleasantly surprised with it actually as an episode. I thought it was well paced, and Naroon's character was thoroughly warrior cast and Minbari. As is often the way, the A and B plots interlinked at the end, and given the past history, Delenn's move is actually quite high risk when there is clearly no love lost between Naroon and humanity as a whole. Ultimately, of course, she has her Satai trump card to play, but up until that point, it does seem like things could have boiled over. This also lays bare the degree of tension there is back home between warrior and religious viewpoints on Minbar, which is interesting given that they are one of the older races, and yet still not wholly at peace internally. Naroon very much gives the impression of being a muzzled attack dog at times, and yet it's interesting that his old commander had a foot in both camps, suggesting that not all Minbari are so doggedly entrenched in just the one camp. This is also a reminder of Delenn's strength of character. Doing what she did was a very ballsy move, and very much driven by her own religious caste convictions, effectively putting Naroon back in his box at the end of the episode when it was necessary to do so. You can see why they are such a strong people. Alyssa obviously gives Ivanova and Talia something to orbit around this episode, but also gives them something in common. Ultimately, both cared about the girl's fate, but from wildly different viewpoints, so there seems to be a sort of grudging respect forming there, if nothing else. We also get moments of humour, of course, with the Pak'ma'ra getting their stomachs pumped, and Natoth's musings as to whether she should check Elise's teeth. So, all in all, it's a very packed episode, some nice effect shots with the war cruiser next to Babylon 5 for scale, and the first time we've seen one in the flesh outside of the Battle of the Line flashbacks. We get a little technical readout on the screen in Scene C about it at the start of the episode too, so I guess all that information will get slurped up as being canon by the technical manuals back in the day. Also interesting that they even have gun ports, rather like cannons on sailing ships. Presumably it's wise to keep your weapons tucked away from debris strikes and the like until you need them. So that was Legacies. We're getting into the final few episodes of the season now, so I suspect the next few videos will be a little longer than average. Thanks for listening, and I hope you like the every expense spared shiny new intro on this video. Perhaps I'll come up with an outro for the next one.